So friends, I am going to share with you the presentation and we will talk about the different modes of entry, but the focus will be on what we call as the entry mode of foreign direct investment. I hope you can see the fact that whether you are a host country player, in this particular case when you are considering country A, the home country, let's say, is India. Okay, so a player in India, okay, a player in India may at some point of time decide to start a new venture and is short of capital. Okay, and what they do is they can actually identify another company, overseas company, and seek capital through the process of what you call as foreign direct investment. Okay, so FDI to begin with is an important source of funding for the domestic businesses, but a foreign entity or individual or a firm may also be interested to invest in a business which is in another country because he or she is looking at that particular country as a potential market, or there are certain key critical resources, the advanced factors or maybe sometimes the basic factors. So resource acquisition could be another motivation, or sometimes it is to build certain capabilities. If you have actually watched that movie Gung Ho, so the idea was to build the capability inherent into the Japanese manufacturing system of quality. Sometimes it is about joint technology development. I mentioned about the Sony Ericsson example where they decided to actually work together to create a new technology domain. And there could be multiple other motives. For example, the risk hedging by entering into different markets through the process of joint venture. So at each level, there could be different motives. Sorry. So basically, when we define FDI, it is nothing but purchase or the control of a company in a country by residents of another country, and typically these are the multinational organization. And this could be in the form of new investment or a joint venture, or it could be a case of merger or acquisition. And remember that if you look at the OECD definition, which is the acronym for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Corporation and Development, any investment of the tune of 10% or above from an overseas company into the nation is known as foreign direct investment. Now, how does it work? Let us take up the example of India. Let me tell you that different nations have different policies, different set of rules and regulation governing what you call as foreign direct investment, different forms. So if you look at the Indian situation, we have two routes. One, what we call as the automatic route. And this is the route that you will find prevalent for most sectors, including the automobile sector, including the service sector, hospitality, single brand retail. Okay, so here there is no permission required except for the fact that within 30 days of issuing of the share to the foreign investor, you have to give the information to Reserve Bank of India. So that is the only thing that the new company or a new venture or the joint venture with the existing firm has to do. Okay, but then there is another route which we call as the government route, which is now restricted only in few sectors. For example, defense and um, you know uh, drugs and some such strategic sectors where you have foreign investment promotion board, which is a part of the government, and approval is given generally in 30 days. But then it has to go to Ministry of Finance, it has to go to the relevant ministry. For example, if you want to invest in defense sector, then the Ministry of Defense will also be a party into this, and I will explain to you in the later part as to how does this process actually work. I don't know what is happening, and by the moment I am putting this. Okay, so as I explained to you, under the automatic route, there is no prior regulatory approval. Okay, either from the Reserve Bank of India or from the FIPB. Okay, and this is rather a simpler route. Now, when you actually go to the example of single brand retailer, so you all must have used the products coming from Decathlon, and you will agree that this is one of the most cost effective solutions to most of our sports and other requirements. So they got the approval for 100% FDI in retail in the year 2013, and initially they had promised to invest 7 billion US dollars. Sorry, 7 billion US dollars. Nahi, it is 7 billions rupees. Okay, which is equivalent to US dollar 95.6 million. And the idea and the intent was to open 60 outlets in India. And as on 2020, the retailer owns more than 75 stores in the country, and it is expected that they will soon come up with 25 new stores. Although there is a caveat, we don't know in the COVID situation whether they would like to go for that kind of expansion or not. Similarly, the furniture seller IKEA. In fact, there are two ways in which it is pronounced. So it's a Swedish company, and they call it IKEA, and the US people pronounce it as IKEA. So there is difference in pronunciation, but Swedish pronunciation is IKEA. So this is another new entrant into the Indian market with 100% fully owned subsidiary, and they have opened the first store in Hyderabad, and there is a story as to how there was a queue on the first day when they opened their store in Hyderabad, and you can have the look of the entire range of the furniture that you can find in India, and there are various interesting products that you can find there. And in this particular case, it had to go to Foreign Investment Promotion Board, and so this proposal was cleared by FIPB, whereas the first one, there was no need to go to FIPB. So these are two cases of what you call as the automatic route and the government route. Okay, so just to give you an example. Okay, let us understand the approval process if it has to go for the approval through government route. So basically, first thing is that the foreign company has to submit a proposal and upload it on the website of the FI, the Foreign Investment Facilitation portal. Okay, and then the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, which is the nodal department to deal with the FDI proposals, if it has to come through the government route, then they will assign the case to the concerned ministry within 2 working days. I gave you the example of defense sector, so it will go to Ministry of Defense. Suppose it has something to do with Ministry of Agriculture and Food Processing, then it will go to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Processing. So in case there is a digitally signed document available, then no physical submission of document is required. If it is not digitally signed, then online communication will be made, and then the applicant has to submit one signed physical copy to the competent authority, and within 5 days of the intimation of such notice, they have to submit the document. So again, it moves through the online process. So within 2 days, it goes to Reserve Bank of India. so that it has to be seen that there is no violation of Foreign Exchange Management Act. Although okay, I don't know whether you know about the balance of payments accounts. So let me just mention to you that there are two major components. One is what you call as the balance of trade, which is about the net of export and import, which includes invisibles or what you call as the services. Okay, and the other is what you call as the capital account. So capital account is where the capital is infused. That is the foreign direct investment will also come under that capital account. So we have allowed full convertibility in the current account, but there are restrictions in terms of the capital account still. And we have been talking about full capital account convertibility for last 20-25 years, but that has not yet happened. Okay, so all proposals are shared with the Ministry of External Affairs and Department of Revenues for the purpose of record. And if they have any reviews, if they have any observations and comments, then they are shared with the administrative ministry or the department under the to whom the proposal belongs. And it is going to take just 1 week for scrutiny of the proposal and soliciting additional requirements, documents, or information if it is required. So once all this information is collected, then they have to take the decision, and that decision has to be taken within the next 2 weeks. And the letter of approval, I would say, in rare cases these days we have rejection. So approval letters are sent online to the applicant, consultant, ministry, department, as the case may be, and the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. And if the extent of foreign equity is more than rupees 5,000 crore, then this will go to the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, and then they have to take a call, and this may take some time, but usually the cabinet will meet at least once in 3 months. Okay, so recently there are some changes, and I thought that I should share with you people that we are into COVID times. Otherwise, let me assure you that now in India we have a very uh, investor friendly policy of foreign direct investment, and except for Bangladesh and Pakistan, for which we had certain restrictions, I think we are almost okay to investment from any nation. Of course, China is another nation which is now entering into this particular list of countries with which we do not have either friendly relations or there are some concerns. So, in 2020, we drafted certain rules which involves tighter scrutiny of the new foreign portfolio investors from China and Hong Kong, because they want to ensure that Chinese investors do not take indirect route to take control of the Indian companies. If you go further down, you will find that it is written, concern has risen in the government that policy change could prompt Chinese investors to ramp up their investment in India as portfolio investor, and they would purchase securities such as equities to gain control. Okay, and so therefore the government of India has decided that it will screen all FDIs from countries with which it shares a land border, and the idea is in particular to ensure that takeover does not take place, because the stock prices are under a lot of volatility and they can go down, and that could be the opportunity for a Chinese or a Hong Kong company to uh, you know uh, gain control of the company. Of course, Chinese government has criticized such a move. Now, interestingly, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have a very friendly foreign direct investment policy. So this is just to illustrate it further. So between 2015-16, in 2015-16 we had 60.22 billion US dollars of investment. 2017-18 again 60.97, so marginal improvement. And during the financial year 2018-19, of course, the provisional figures, and we haven't come up with the latest figures. So this again, since it is the provisional figure, actual figures are usually higher. So the record foreign direct investment, and you know uh, 74 billion US dollar worth proposals have been approved. But inflow of capital takes its own time. Approval comes first, and then comes the sharing of the stock with the multinational. So if you follow the trend for the last 19 and a half years, we got 642 US billion dollars. And in the last 5.5 years, we were able to get 319 billion US dollars worth of FDI. So this is almost 50% of the FDI inflow in the last 19 and a half years. So you can see, how our perception is changing among the multinational organization, and we are, having a distinction of being a country which favors foreign direct investment. So, barring the China case and Pakistan and Bangladesh, I think we have evolved as a very friendly nation. Now, let us talk in particular about the joint venture, and then we can also talk about the foreign direct investment through the 100% equity route. Okay, so what is a joint venture? A joint venture is nothing but a legal organization that takes the form of a short-term partnership in which the persons jointly undertakes a transaction for mutual profit, and each person brings in something what we call as assets, and they share the risk associated with the new venture. It could be for a specific project or a product, or it could be a continued relationship. And as I mentioned earlier also, in Indian law, the joint venture is governed primarily by Indian Contract Act, the Foreign Exchange Management Act, Foreign Direct Investment Policy, and some of the other corporate laws depending on what is the context. Now, let us identify as to why joint ventures became such a prominent form of entry into the international business. Now, I would give a question to all of you, mention in chat, or otherwise you can unmute and answer. That is to name at least 2 joint ventures that you know of which are operating in India. So I'm waiting for the response from the students. Please mention any 2 joint ventures that you know of. Okay, Ishwar has mentioned Maruti Suzuki. Yes, now it is having majority control by Suzuki Motor Corporation, so it can be called as a Japanese, more of a Japanese company than the Indian company. Okay, Muskan says Hero Honda. Very right, rightly observed. But it is no longer working as a joint venture entity. Both have parted ways in a very amicable manner, and we'll talk more about it. Yes, ICI Prudential, almost all the insurance companies have some or the other partner which is coming from the foreign nation. So anybody else who would like to share more such example? And you can see over here that Maruti Suzuki is one of the major story about the success of joint ventures into the Indian market. So the primary reason why we have joint venture is that there are administrative compulsions. How? Many governments in past were insisting that there has to be development of local partner through the joint venture. So therefore it was mandatory on the part of a foreign company to join hands with a local firm if they want to have access to market or the resources. Now, this concern was strongest in some of the developing nations. And in 1991, till 1991, we were rather not welcoming foreign direct investment. In fact, in 1977, when there was a change of government, before that, we had the Congress government, and Mrs. Indira Gandhi was our prime minister. But in 1975, this is just for information of the students, because you may not know, because it is now history. So in 1975, Mrs. Indira Gandhi actually imposed emergency, and many of the rights were curtailed. Rights of the common citizens were curtailed. So in 1977, when she decided to hold elections, she lost the elections. And when the new government came, Mr. Morarji Desai was our new prime minister. At that point of time, Mr. George Fernandez, who was following the socialist philosophy, insisted that we should not have foreign direct investment, and even if such investment is there, it should be restricted only to 6% or at most to 40%. So we had IBM, which was a strong player in India, and we had Coca-Cola. So both of these companies, they refused to abide by this particular diktat of the then minister, Mr. George Fernandez, and they had 100% equity venture, or it was they had the majority stake. I'm not very sure whether it was 100%. Okay, so they refused to dilute their equity stake, which means they decided that either they would like to have full control over their operations in India, or they would like to quit. So IBM and Coca-Cola, they left Indian market. So so you can understand that we had a very different kind of international business environment in our country. If you get back into the history, I mean, it's not that the Congress government was very friendly, but then socialists were more inclined towards policies which take care of the last person, that is the bottom of the pyramid. And industrialization and industrial companies, particularly multinational corporations, were not welcome. But then 1991, we had and I would say that accidentally we embarked on the path of LPG. So again, what is LPG? Liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So we were not able to fulfill our debt obligations to International Monetary Fund, and therefore they impose certain conditions that unless we make our markets open, uh, you know if you want to continue to have the support in terms of the grant, then you have to open up your economy. And therefore, Mr. Manmohan Desai, who was the finance minister in the time of the government of Narsimha Rao, so he actually set the tone for the globalization in country. And therefore, in 1991, we had a new industrial policy which welcomed foreign investment. And entry of Suzuki Motor Corporation actually took place even earlier in 1984. This negotiation started, and by 1985, we had the a joint venture commissioned and ready for production. And before the entry of Suzuki Motor Corporation, we had only two companies, Premier Automobile and Hindustan Motors. So we had another one, Standard. That was another car that we used to have. So 1984, yes, although the Maruti Udyog started with collaboration with Suzuki Motor Corporation, but then there again there was an ulterior motive. This was the pet project of the son of the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and somehow he met he died. in an air crash, and the idea was to ensure that this pet project of Mr. Sanjay Gandhi actually works, and therefore they thought that why not invite some foreign company to revive the ailing Maruti Udyog Limited. And so there was a chance meeting of the then CMD, Mr. Krishnamurthy, with the Suzuki Motor Corporation CEO, and then they discussed, and we already were having a negotiation with some of the US players like General Motors, but then they found that the Japanese proposal is better, and probably more attuned to the local requirements in India. And therefore, we started with this joint venture of Maruti Suzuki. So, first reason why joint ventures take place is that most nations have such requirement that you have to join with some of the local partners, so that the local industry also develops the right kind of capabilities. Um, so again, capability is the key. So the foreign company wants to access the critical resources, asset, and competencies, and they look for a local firm with capabilities in distribution, because the distribution system varies in each nation. Similarly, the sales network and the local market, the nuances of the local market, they vary from one market to another. And the way the production system operates, and the labor legislations and how they impact. So, all of these are unique in every market. So, it is in fact beneficial for a multinational to have association with a local joint venture partner. And another very important thing is that in spite of the talk of transparency, there are still so many nations in which there is rampant corruption. And getting approval for foreign direct investment is a tedious task, and you require the local contact and liaison and lobbying, and have some requirement of some or the other kind of business network. So therefore, you would require a joint partner to share the capability in these avenues with you. And of course, if you have a production capability which is a part of the joint venture business, then you require local human resource, and there again the local partner can be very useful. And recall the EPRG framework, which says that typically the companies will start with ethnocentric orientation, and then as they move from one market to many new markets, they follow the polycentric approach. And this is one of the preferred mode, and the adoption of the polycentric approach is regiocentric approach. But when you talk about multinationals, which are actually the technology trendsetters, they are less inclined to tie up with the local partner, because they believe that they have all the resources, they have all the experience, and the market will adjust to them. The products that they offer are such that they don't need to adjust to the local market. The local market is actually waiting for these products. And so companies with strong international brands such as IKEA and Sony, so they don't actually need to actually adapt or come with foreign partners. We saw that IKEA entered as a 100% fully owned subsidiary. Now that we are talking about IKEA, let's just see, there is a interesting video, and which talks about the fact that how multinational organizations also adapt to the local requirements, and in many subtle ways as well. So let us hope that this video runs and you are able to have access to this video. This is the first time I'm trying it, so you can I can skip the ad.
Pronunciation, which is something like Ikea. Now, of course, English and Swedish have different sounds. That makes the English speakers look at the letters I, K, E, A, and pronounce them as IKEA. And in fact, this is what the adverts speak S do. But the others in the UK choose a more Swedish pronunciation. Perhaps or maybe to remind us of its Swedish roots. Who knows? But what is interesting is that the C of IKEA pronounces it in a more English way when you speak to English people. And in a more Swedish way when you talk to Swedish. So instead of IKEA, if you want to sound English, please understand you. Or say IKEA if you want to show this.
Okay, so I have stopped sharing, and yeah, I could see that you know uh, you were witnessing some or the